Good afternoon again. We are resuming our briefing meeting. It is 3:43. And to move right along, we have our speed readers. Executive services. And we have, it's the non-discrimination briefing on policy 1.27. And we have Mr. Ryan Hodak and Mr. Chuck Bradley. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. So we're just bringing back the policy that we brought to you prior. There has been one change based on your recommendation. There was concern about the retaliation language on lines 29 through 31. So we have added the highlighted area you can see in association or connection with this policy to eliminate any confusion as far as I know the RSM was brought up, so it would only be relative.
Can you speak into the, thank you.
Sorry. I know there was confusion. RSM was brought up, so this way it would clarify that this is in regards to only this policy for the non-discrimination and not other policies.
Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, so on lines 22 through 24, are we putting the cart before the horse? Can we enact policy requiring something to be collectively bargained in the next contract? Don't we have to enact that policy after it's been collectively bargained? Doesn't this kind of violate the, Dr. Atkins, the name?
Oh, 447.
The kind of bargaining we do?
Interest-based.
Interest-based. Doesn't this violate the interest-based process? Would it be considered bargaining in bad faith if we're requiring in a policy for them to adopt something that they haven't yet bargained? Am I making sense?
Wasn't it just stating that they're just stating whatever they do bargain and they won't there will be a non-discrimination? That's my understanding, is they're just saying there is no discrimination whether they're bargaining for if it has been or not yet.
No, I understand that that's what it's saying, but we can't adopt the policy until they have agreed to put it in their contract. This feels backwards to me in terms of the negotiation process. Collective. Am I crazy, Dr. Atkins?
Well, I think in this,
It's two questions.
and I, Mr. Quick wants to comment here, but this is complying with a law. So we're working, so law comes first, then contract, then policy.
Okay. Okay.
So I think because it's required that we have a non-discrimination policy in the law, then we would have to put it in policy and the contract.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, next, please, if we could have business services, the budget prioritize, and if I can have whoever's speaking, state your name, because we have a lot of presenters, so I'm not sure who will be up here. And thank you so much for all of your patience and sticking it out with us today.
Board members, as they're getting their presentation ready, I just want to say briefly, this is there's been a lot of hard work that has gone into these efforts. It's truly been a team effort, and it is ongoing. We are going to circle back with our school principals a little bit later this week as we finalize our plans for next year. We also, we have this opportunity here for the board to talk about our Big Five goals and Vision 2030, our strategic plan. I'm sure there'll be opportunity for public comment tomorrow night, and then Again, we have had a lot of communication that's gone back and forth between our school leaders, staffs, and our community. So I'm looking forward to this presentation. I think that the team has done a great job with the research, and I want to commend them on that. And having said that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Desamores, who will begin our presentation.
Good afternoon, Dr. Atkins, members of the board. Thank you so much. We are excited to share with you a plethora of information that we have today between business services and academic services about some of the things that we've been planning for FY21 budget and what you can expect. So in terms of priorities, we wanted to have this conversation and be able to share with you some of the priorities that are being focused on for the next year's budget for 2021 to ensure that it reflects the things that you would expect to see and give some opportunity from feedback if there are some things that are not here that you were expecting to see. So you all have seen this graphic before in terms of the big five, the superintendent's goals. There are each of these five, we have some detailed, some more detailed information in terms of some of the things that we are building into the 2021 budget for it, and then we'll get into some details surrounding other things within academic services and priorities within next year's budget for that as well.
That being said, we just wanted to kind of go through each one of the big five and kind of tell you the things that we are looking at doing in FY21. So for our extended learning opportunities, we're adding a summer, primary, and intermediate. We're expanding those programs for K-4 at our Title I schools. We're offering some middle school opportunities for some additional ones at the at the middle schools for summer. And we have a partnership with the YMCA for the summer as well. So as far as the pre-K goes, we're opening some new pre-K rooms at James Stevens. We're expanding our fee-based pre-K program at Lehigh Elementary School.
All of these are items we believe that we've touched upon a little bit before and that you have heard about, but knowing that just kind of putting these into categories related to the superintendent's big five and knowing that we are planning to include items in next year's budget for these things.
And just to emphasize this before we move on, when it came to department and division budgets, our team was real clear that during the budget process, the focus should be in these areas only. You know, this is really what our strategic plan should drive our budget, and so our department directors are not bringing forward budget requests that fall outside of this. In fact, they are trying to run within a very lean budget because we want to provide as much for compensation as we possibly can, which is, of course, one of the big five is workforce.
So as far as expanding career and technical opportunities, we're looking at all of our CTE opportunities at our high schools. We're reviewing the plans for future growth of our technical colleges. For increased workforce, of course, we're looking at increasing salaries for employees and the expansion of the differentiated pay. For the proximity-based student assignment, we've hired Davis Demographics and Planning, and I think he was here and spoke to you recently to work on the new proximity plan. And there was some FY21 adjustments to the student assignment plan that they brought to you all not too long ago as well. And as Dr. Atkins talked about, the divisions, or the departments, have been given direction to review all of their processes and procedures to see where some savings can be found and to look for any kind of increased efficiencies and cost savings within their budgets in order to focus the money on the big five and additional salaries for employees. In the academic areas, we're looking at additional resources for the ESOL program. We're reviewing the school allocations right now with academic services and principals. We've looking for increased instructional time with the students, maximizing our schedules with the students. We're looking at tiered level of support so that the students that need it the most have the resources they need, and maximum flexibility for our schools so that they can do what they need to do for the student population they have.
Now, given it sounded like a pretty succinct list of things within the Big Five and the academic priorities, but we said a lot in that, right, in terms of what it means to the budget and the types of resources that this could take. So we want to, at this point in time, turn it over to our esteemed colleague, Dr. Spiro, and his academic services crew, who will go into some detail related to these academic priorities, which really, along with the Big Five, form the major basis and the very reason why our budget will exist for next fiscal year. So we're going to turn that over to Dr. Spiro and Academic Services for some additional information.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's been a long day. We appreciate your attention today because we do have a lot of important information that we're going to be sharing with you. We're going to first begin with Dr. Rivera and Carlos, and they're going to talk to us a little bit about ELL. ELL, as you've heard for the last couple board meetings, continues to be an area of focus for us, not only in academic services, but it really does impact our schoolhouses as well. So when Dr. Desimores and I were talking about our priorities, we started right off out of the gate with ELL being our main focus. And so they're going to share with you a little bit of information, and then we're going to talk to you about next steps with ELL. Dr. Rivera?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear board members and Dr. Atkins. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share with you information about our ESOL program, our demographics, and also achievement data, support that we provide to the ELS and their teachers, and also next step for recommendations. We're going to begin our next slide. I think that I need to then click in here. Thank you, Dr. Spiro. With some data, basic demographics about our ELLs, and you can see that we provided two charts that can show the growth that the ELL population as a group has grown in the last 6 years. The chart on the left of the screen is a line graph that shows that since in 2014-15, there were about 8,236 ELLs in the district. You can see that year after year, that number has grown. To this day, there were approximately 12,090 ELLs students in our district. That shows that it's approximately 3,854 more ELS students in this county in this year than in 2014. The next chart next to it is about the ELS monolinguals. You know that upon enrollment in our district, our students get tested for ESOL services. That assessment is what makes them eligible for the program. And in that assessment, we also know the language proficiency level of the students. And as you can see, again, this bar graph compares the number of ELLs that became eligible for the program. And next to each bar graph is also the number of students and percentage that became monolingual. As we know, it's not the same having a student that has some language proficiency. It's a little bit easier on the teachers, right? Those of you who have been teachers, but also the ones that come with basically no language proficiency are more challenging for the teachers. You need to do extra steps, provide more support. Next one, the ELS, we look deeper into the data, and also we look at students as they come to us. Most of the students come on grade level with wonderful skills that are transferable to the new language, but then there's a group of students that came to us. Yes?
Excuse me, Ms. Rivera, if Ms. Patrica had a question regarding your last graph.
Which one?
The one on the right, I don't really understand what that graph means.
Slide.
Does that mean
Graph.
that
Yeah.
in in 15, we had 2,496 students tested, 1,734 of which were monolingual, and those same students were tested in 1920, and only 1,030 were monolingual?
No, these are brand new students.
Okay.
brand new,
So the
A
number
new student each year.
is decreasing?
Yeah. Don't forget that in 1 year, there was like the Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. That's the year when you see that a large increase of ELLs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, academic gaps. As I was saying earlier, students, most of them come to us on grade level with good skills in literacy skills that are transferable to the new language, and there's a group of students that have come to us with academic gaps due to interrupted schooling. As you can see, in 2016-17, that's when we started to see that influx of ELLs with academic gaps. We had, at that time, 140 students with interrupted schooling, and then the following year were 220, then the number grew to 482, and this year we had 655 students with interrupted schooling. That again, that places a big challenge on our teachers because not only they have to provide support for the language proficiency, but also to fill those gaps in literacy that the students would not possess. We took also look deeper at the data and the same students with academic gaps this year. We broke it down all the same years by gaps. For example, in 2016-17, out of those 140 ELS with interrupted schooling, there were 68 that had a gap of between 1 to 2 year gap. Then following, again, out of the same 140, 49 students had gaps of 3 and 4 years of academic gap. And continue again, there were 5 students with 7 to 11 years of academic gap. Can you imagine this, how the challenge that this represents at a high school level? Yeah.
Just real quick.
Yes, Ms. Morgan.
So, but in fact, we're getting better educated kids because the percentage of them with 1 to 2 years gap is
Yeah.
growing. So
It is growing.
fewer with
Yeah.
the
Year gap, for example, in 2019, this year actually, 484 students, show a big gap of 1 or 2 years academic gap. This information is collected at the school student enrollment, and this is provided voluntarily by the parents.
What I'm saying is that half of the kids who came in with academic gaps in 16-17, half of those kids had more than 2 year gap.
Yes.
If you look at 19-20,
Yes.
a significant, from a percentage point of view, far fewer students had as big a gap.
You are correct.
So the pressure is, there is a pressure in terms of just sheer numbers of kids, but the number of kids who are significantly off path is fewer. So your focus is really on the 1 and 2 years. Am I reading that correctly?
Correct.
That is correct. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Did you have,
Just a quick one. So
Yes, I'm
basically
sorry.
then for generically, that gap is saying that 68 students did not achieve on the level they should be by age appropriateness, or how is
No,
that gap? Is that gap,
Sure.
they come here and they go into first grade, it's 7th grade, but their only achievement is at 5th grade.
Okay, let me tell you how it happens. It happens because the students are placed on grade level based on their age appropriate grade level. And then the last grade that the student attended back in his country is what determines the gap.
Okay.
This student should have been based on his age back in his country on this grade level. They are here, for example, they come to us, like, for example, in 10th grade, and the last grade that they attended was maybe 3rd grade back in the country. That's what the gap is about.
Okay, and then, but does that mean, our academic standards, I won't say standards, but are different? So in other words, like my husband's from Trinidad, and their
Yes.
12th year is different from our 12th year in school. So is that taken into consideration to give us this gap? And
No, it does not. It's based on
That
our
would be
analysis.
another problem on top of this, not only the years of academic gap, but also the curriculum that they received back in their country, which is different from the standards that we have here.
Exactly, so we're bringing them into our standards. and
standards.
Our curriculum.
Right.
And for their age, they should be here, but academically, they're here.
Right.
Exactly.
And we're not taking into consideration from whence they came.
Yeah, based on the grade level that they attended, the last one, they should have been continuing the next grade level in here. That should have been perhaps maybe 4th grade, for example, in this case, but that's where they belong based on their age, maybe in 10th grade.
Ms. Morgan, you had another question?
Yeah, I do. So looking at this, I'm thinking, are we getting fewer Guatemalans who tend to have a very poor level of education when they come in. And we're getting either families who are better educated immigrating, which would change really what kind of language support we have to provide. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Most of these students who interrupted are from Guatemala, most of them,
But they're
the
coming better
majority
educated.
of them.
But it could be fewer, students coming from those countries.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And more from countries where the educational system is more solid.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Any other question about this chart?
You're good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Achievement data. This is Dr. Carlos Negron's piece.
Okay, this
What is
chart,
it? Carlos
the
what?
one on the left, actually explains the percentage of ELL students.
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm Carlos Negron. I'm the ELL coordinator, and I have the pleasure to work with Evelyn Rivera. And so this is the data that represents, the percentage of ELL students that scored level 3 or above on these different tests. As you can see, from 2017 school year, 17-18 to 18-19, in ELA, math, and biology, and also U.S. history, we had a gain there. It's not a big gain. It's not a big gain, but we need to celebrate that, taking into account, the limitations that these students come with. However, science, 5th and 8th grade, they're performing below what's expected, and there was a decrease in percentage of achievement in those two areas. Mm-hmm.
So then the question is, how did that compare to the regular 5th and 8th graders? Did that also decline?
Yes, I have the data here for science. I combined both. I can't disaggregate that, but just to give you, a brief overview of that. The non-ELLs combined 5th and 8th grade, their achievement level, the percentage for 2019 is 52.2%. So in every single area here, we have a gap between the ELLs and the non-ELLs of more than 40%. So that's very significant. We have a lot of work to do with these kids.
I understand that, but maybe I didn't phrase my question correctly. So what I'm supposing is that student performance across the line in science decreased. Therefore, the decrease in ELL is really not a function of the ELL instruction. It's a function of the science instruction in those grades.
Actually, it could be a combination of two things: the conceptual understanding of these, difficult concepts that they need to master, for those standards, and also the literacy skills that are very low in order to be able to read the test. So they need to apply those two things in order to perform better on the test.
Let me take a stab at it here. So what we saw is we did see science, achievement, particularly at grade 5 and 8 overall was declined. And so you saw a similar one with our ELL students. Now, having said that, the good news is that when I look structurally, when you look at how is science instruction occurring this year as opposed to 17-18, there's been substantial differences that I think a lot of our schools have put into place. For example, elementary school, you have greater departmentalization of science with instructors that are focused on that have a real knack for that, because what tends to happen if you focus on ELA and mathematics, and you don't have a teacher that's science oriented, then they're going to put a stress on ELA and mathematics, and you won't have as much emphasis on 5th grade. But I've been to a lot of schools now that have looked at how we're doing 4th and 5th grade and have changed that so you have more of a departmental model, and then they have someone who has a real interest and background in science who is instructing those students. at a greater level than what I've seen in years past. The other thing that our middle schools are doing in science that's different is they look at their block schedule. I know in a number of the higher achieving ones, they're making sure that, like with ELA and mathematics, they're having science every day. And in some cases, I know, like I was at, I believe it was Diplomat Middle School, where what they do is they may have an 8th grade science, but then there's the next day they're looping back and they're hitting 6th grade and 7th grade standards, so that the students stay current, so they don't, when they get to the 8th grade test, some of those standards that are on that exam, they get reinforced throughout the year in 8th grade as well.
The point I was trying to make is that they're not slipping relative to their peers.
Right, yes.
And by tackling the problem for one group, the expectation would be you're tackling it across the entire spectrum, and that we should see all of them come up next year.
Right, and maybe Dr. Spiro, you could speak to some of the or Dr. Rivera, some of the strategies science-wise that's being employed in the elementary schools, and with the program that.
I don't want to bog us down.
Yeah.
If other board members want to
I have one question on the science, though.
Yes.
Okay, so the biology, is that not high school, like 7th? Is that? High school. What grade is?
Biology is high school, it will be the high school assessment,
right?
yes.
So is it fair to say with this data that 5th and 8th grade are low in science, but then they pick it up in biology? Because at first when you look at it, it's like, well, why is science so low? But biology is good.
Right.
So is it a catch up, by the time they get to high school with it, or? Do you understand?
And I would say across the board, science has been when we talk to content areas, that's been one of our greatest areas of concentration this past year, because we really didn't see the growth that we were hoping to see across the board. And so there's been an extra effort. And Dr. Atkins, you actually captured very well your example of middle school, of reteaching the standards is exactly what happens back in elementary school as they spiral back in those standards for 3rd and 4th and the 5th grade as well, because each one of those years there are new standards, and they go back and reteach. And so you were spot on, sir. Well done. Thank you.
So they're reteaching it in the middle school, which prepares them to do better in high school. Okay.
All right.
Certainly.
Ms. Vaughn? Go ahead.
Do the lower tier students take a different science? Don't they take a different science when they get to high school before they take biology, like an integrated science or something like that?
Yes, they do.
So that may
integrated.
also explain part of the uptick with the biology, because the lower kids have that extra
And that's a layer.
year.
Yes.
And the biology students are, generally speaking, the higher level if they're taking it as freshmen.
We agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah. So that shows that they actually have an extra year of
Catch up.
tutoring, but to
That is correct.
scaffold them up
Yes.
to where they need to be.
It's also important to note.
Yes, a question. Ms. Morgan.
Question.
I'm tempted to ask Dr. Savage, because
He's sitting there.
I think he understands where I'm trying to go, which is that, relative to their peers, they're advancing, but we're not making a big difference, really, in closing the gap. That's the question I'm trying to get at. Am I being clear?
Well, I would just say, with a single slide such as this, that's showing the proficiency rate or the achievement rate, it's very difficult. I would just caution a lot of in-depth analysis, disaggregating to various different populations in contrast to this particular piece, as well as just year-over-year changes and so forth. I would just caution that if there is a genuine interest to dig deeper on particular areas in any particular subgroup, or longitudinal trends and so forth, that they are all very worthy of a much longer study, and that you could have some very compelling things to answer some of the questions you all have been getting at. But I would caution that off the cuff here, you probably will not be able to get the satisfying answers that you would be looking for just strictly based on the data that is here. There's just some additional overlays and things that you could do to really speak to some of these larger lines of inquiry. But I would just caution that you're probably not going to get a satisfying, complete answer from that.
Which leads me to, So what are we doing? Is what we're talking about spending money on really tackling the problem? Do we know that?
Right, so that's part of the budgetary process. So we talk about research-based best practices to reach our ELL students, and do we have the bandwidth currently in place to make sure that those strategies are infused all the way into the classroom? And I think as Dr. Rivera goes on with your presentation, when she shows you, the amount, for example, how many ESOL specialists that she has compared to the number of teachers and students you serve, you're going to see that there's a great need, because the PSYOP strategies that she's going to talk about, that is the main strategy that we really use to our teachers to help reach our ELL students.
Okay, if I could, if it's at all possible for us to hold the questions until, I know everybody has questions, but until the end of the presentation, so at least we get through the presentation, because we're at 4:15 now. And I just, thank you.
Okay. So,
I
but
tell you.
going back to biology, still, we saw that increase, right? Let me see. From one school year to the following one in biology, but still, compared to the non-ELL students, that gap is 46%. And the combination of 5th and 8th grade, the gap is 45%. Even though they jumped, in biology, the gap is still the same as the other ones. And the last one is English proficiency. That's based on the access test. We have to administer this test every year to ELL students to see how much English they're acquiring. And we saw a decline there. We lost 2%. And of course, one of the reasons would be that we're getting, more LY students that are, monolingual. And of course, that compounds to that problem, if we want to call it that way. And on the other side, we have the graduation rates. And these are very good news, and thank you to the work of Shelley Taylor. She has put together an ESOL graduation task force. We can see that there was a 13.4% increase from school year 2014 to 15 to school year 2018-19. And not only that gap between the ELLs and the non-ELLs decreased from 29.4% school year 14-15 to 25.2% 18-19 school year. So this is a positive trend, but we need to continue on that path. We need to sustain what we're doing and also expand the support that we need to continue with this, especially with the long-term ELL students in high school. And let's go to the next. Here's on this chart, we have all the supplementary materials, or most of the supplementary materials that we provide to schools and teachers to enhance instruction, and also to provide students with more practice in different areas of language and literacy. I am not going over each one of those because we will stay here forever, but I'd like to draw the attention to Imagine Learning, which is widely used in the district. Teachers love it. It has a lot of reports that teachers can look at to see where the weaknesses of these kids are in terms of literacy and language, and provide that opportunity for them to work on comprehension, basic vocabulary, academic language, and other elements of literacy. We have Rosetta Stone, Brain Pop to build students' background knowledge, those students that come with to our country with no literacy background in their native language. And also we have a new one. Actually, we have been implementing this Fast Forward computer program, and that's specifically for students that come with interrupted schooling or limited formal education. And the schools that are implementing this at the secondary level really love this program, and our goal is to continue to expand this for next year. We're going to identify those students that will benefit the most from it and provide this kind of support to them. And last, we have the bilingual dictionaries that are state approved. Not only they serve as an instructional tool in the classroom, but also they're approved for state testing. And those are some of the programs that we provide, supplementary programs, not to replace a core curriculum, but to enhance instruction.
Okay, we also provide other support to our ELLs. We have ESOL paraprofessionals. We had 15 that are paid out of the Title III grant. Those 15 paraprofessionals are assigned to schools with greater ESOL need. This is above and beyond what the district provides. The schools are placed in tiers of support for ESOL. We do this with the assistance of the accountability office. We take into consideration like the number of ELS per school, also the percentage, the number of students with interrupted schooling, and also the achievement data. And we're getting all that data, then we come up with a rating and begin from the schools that have the most needs and start assigning those paraprofessionals until we have no more paraprofessionals to assign. Also, we concentrate on our international centers, and they get the Dunbar High School gets 2 ESOL paraprofessionals because of the need. Also, South Fort Myers High School and Easley County High School, all those 3 schools get 2 of the ESOL paraprofessionals for the schools. We also provide 3 ESOL ELS summer camps. As Carlos mentioned, science is an area of great need for both middle school and high school and elementary. So we have an elementary science camp that is for elementary grades and also for middle school science. All of our ELLs in grades 4 and also grade 8, 6, and 7 get invited to those camps. Again, we're doing something like Dr. Atkins mentioned. We're again revisiting those benchmarks and those standards that were not revisited in the next years, and we're going back to the 3rd grade, for example, that are not revisited in 4th grade, and also then touching those also new standards that they're going to learn in 5th grade to build background knowledge for the students. We do the same with the 6th graders and 7th to prepare them also for the statewide assessment in science for the corresponding grade levels. Also, we provide an ELS language camp for our newcomers at the high school level, taking into consideration that is the grade that they actually have the most challenge and they have the least time to meet requirements. They have just a few years to meet graduation requirements and also to exit with a high school diploma. So that's why we've selected those 3 camps with a specific purpose to meet the needs of those groups of ELLs. We also have 2 ESOL compliance specialists that even though they don't work with kids directly, but they manage and monitor the data in regards to student identification, and they also make sure that the schools are complying with the meta consent decree. They also pay attention that students get identified in a timely manner, because the faster the students get identified for ESOL services, the faster they start beginning receiving supplementary resources. So that's something that they watch all the time and make sure that our weighted FTE goes to the DOE perfect, so we don't lose any money for our district. Also, we have a wonderful ELL instructional leader dedicated solely to leading the schools in PSYOP training and also to work with teachers that need some more ideas and be more resourceful in regards to how to meet their ELS needs. This person basically also represents our ESOL department in our ELL graduation task force, along with Shelley Taylor, and they actually took to a wonderful initiative. They met with all the high school people that have to do with, that deal with guidance counselor. They have at least 1 person from each high school. They met with these people back in May or April of last year. They created this group, and throughout the year, they go to the schools monitoring that the students, kind of keep track of who's the students, the ELLs, and that they're meeting the graduation requirements. So we are dedicating this group just solely to focus on the ELL graduation, so make sure that they graduate in time with their cohort. Also, we have another layer of support, which is a very important support, in our opinion, has to do with ESOL specialists. These are teachers that are providing services out of the classroom. They provide support to the teachers of ELS through lesson modeling. They also do coaching, and they provide training. Could be just for a teacher, or it could be this school-wide training. They also participate in the school's PLCs. All of them have a group of schools assigned to them. So all of our schools, including charter schools, also have an ESOL specialist assigned to their school. These mean also they work in small groups sometimes, then when there's a need to model strategies for the teacher on how to best actually create groups of support for ELS and interventions, they sit down and they model the whole process from beginning to end. As you can see in this chart, we compiled the information from 2012-13 to 2019-20, and we actually took a look at how many ELS were in K through 12 during those years and how many ESOL specialists were in the district providing support to these schools. Don't forget that these teachers also work with the teachers of these students. So the larger the number of students, the larger the number of teachers working with these students and in need of support. And therefore, as you can see, in 2012-13, there were 6,299 ELS in the district, and we had 6 ESOL specialists providing support to our schools. That is a ratio of approximately 1,050 students per ESOL specialist. Continue going again. The following year, we then had 1 less ESOL specialist, only 5, and still the ELS population grew by maybe almost 200 kids. They continued again with less specialists providing support to more students and more teachers, to the point that in this year, as you can see, 2019-20, the number of ELLs are now almost double, 12,090 ELLs, and we still have the same 6 ESOL specialists providing supports, and then the ratio of ELS per ESOL specialist has doubled from 1,015 in 2012-13 to 2,015 in this year. So
this is a budget conversation, right? So one of the reasons we think this slide is so important is because as a number of our ELL students have increased, we've stayed stagnant with the type of support we provided teachers. And so we asked earlier about the data, about making that movement forward, and we really believe in the strategies of PSYOP, because they're not only good for ELL students, but all students, but our teachers need the coaching and the in-classroom coaching. So as they're teaching our students, stopping right there to give them the coaching opportunities so they can increase and improve their own toolkit as an educator. So for us, this is a budgetary highlight that we've been working with Dr. Desamore and her team on.
The next slide.
Next step. Well, thank you, Dr. Rivera. So, which goes into our next steps, and you've heard at the last couple meetings about our curriculum advisory committee led by Ms. Vaughn has been working diligently on this, and we are ready to bring a recommendation to the curriculum advisory and for them to approve or to massage and bring forward something different. But we're going to focus in on personnel, like you just saw with ESOL specialists. We're going to talk about how do we deepen that professional development for all of our teachers. We think that's a crucial component as we continue to reach our ELL students. And then what does that instructional framework look like inside of the classroom? So that is going to be the part of the recommendation that we'll bring forward. Ms. Morgan, we didn't provide the gap data you were looking for today, and so our team could put that together. And we can have that, though.
But it's not necessary.
Okay.
Really not.
I just wanted to make sure. And so any questions for this team?
You said that charter schools have an ESOL specialist. Is that one ESOL specialist for all charters?
No.
And are we?
No, they actually they're by zones. So there's the 6 specialists might have 1 or 2 of the charter schools themselves among the group of charter schools.
So how is that budgeted? Does that come out of the charter schools?
I'm sorry?
FEFP we give them, or is that coming out of the 5% we retain?
Go ahead.
Comes from Title III, because don't forget, by the DOE, charter schools are entitled to receive the same services with Title III funding.
Right.
So therefore, they are to receive also the same kind of services with our ESOL.
I get that. Where's the money coming from?
Title III.
Title III grant.
Title III.
Title III Part A.
Grant goes directly to the charter school?
Yes.
Great.
They're
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Census.
Ms. Fisher?
So with the ratio of the ESOL specialists to students, is that compliant with Meta consent decree, and is that educational equity, or are we having to look at that budgetarily for that reason?
There's no compliance for the ESOL special. It's something that we do in the district. There's compliance in regards to students. In regards to the meta consent decree states that when the school reaches 15 students that speak the same native language, they are to be provided with assistance of a paraprofessional who works directly with the ELL students. But this one is particular for support for the teachers and the student, mostly working with the teachers.
Right.
Okay, every teacher that we reach out and we help and enhance her practices is a teacher that is better prepared to meet these ELL needs.
Agreed.
So that portion of it is based on what the school itself is assigned in terms of support.
Right.
This is, as she said, this is district training for the teachers.
Correct.
Okay.
I do want to say, Dr. Rivera, I was visiting Spring Creek last week, actually. 90% LY students at that particular school, and the principal and the assistant principal both complimented you on the support that I guess you'd recently had up support in that building to help with their population. So that was kind of neat to see that on the ground and hear that from the principal on a visit.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to transition now to our next team members, where we are going to have our scheduling discussion. And this is a discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about maximizing learning opportunities for students. When Dr. Desamore began this presentation, and we were talking about the budget, and one of the priorities, it is about maximizing opportunities for students. And this has been a conversation that has been going on for us since August. When I began, and Dr. Atkins challenged our team to really become the best in the state, we began looking at a myriad of different factors. Obviously, we analyzed student achievement data. We compared ourselves to the state, how do like schools rank across the state. We looked at other districts' pupil progression plans and mirrored that against ours and said, what is different with their progression as compared to our progression as well? What does their data say? Is their data comparable to ours? We've been working with our assistant principals for curriculum at both middle school and high school on looking at progressions. We've been working with our principals on this data as well, and the need for a focus around increased instructional time for our students is where this came from. So I say this is a scheduling discussion because this is another step in the process for us. Obviously, this has been very loud out there for everybody right now on social media around the scheduling discussion, and I'm proud of our students for using their platforms and using their voices to really talk about what they value. And so when people ask me, well, have you seen? Well, absolutely, yes, we have seen. We've read the petitions online. We read the social media posts. Mr. Simmons attended the Cape Coral High School forum where he had students lined up ready to talk to him as well. We've answered emails, phone calls, and so we're taking all of that into consideration as we have this discussion around how can we maximize student learning time. Our system that we had in place for that as we got closer to really talking about these conversations more publicly was for every high school principal to meet with their leadership team first to talk about scheduling conversations, and then he or she was to stand faced in front of their faculty and to have this conversation around scheduling options. They then also collected information from students that came forward, from parents that came forward. All of that information was collected. Last week, we had a meeting with the principals. Superintendent was there, all the chiefs were in the room, the executive directors were in the room, and we went school by school by school, where everybody shared, this is my school community's input on where we are right now in regard to scheduling. So I don't want you, just because we're here today, thinking this is a conversation that all of a sudden appeared. Team has been dogmatic at looking at options for our students, because all of this is about kids for us. This isn't about what's easiest for adults in a building. This is about how do we maximize learning for students? Because come the end of the day, all of us in this room, all of us, our focus needs to be around students. And that's where our focus has been as we go through this. We're going to talk to you about a lot today. Mr. Simmons is going to talk to us later on about scheduling options we've discussed for high school. Ms. Mayer is going to talk to you about middle school as well. We're going to talk to you about the planning time for teachers. We're going to talk to you about what do these schedules look like. And we're also going to talk to you about what are the benefits and implications of each of these schedules. And we've tried to really think of everything as possible. So I have my book open with my pen here. So as we're having these conversations, I'm probably going to stop and make some notes with information you share with us as well, because again, this is part of the process as we have this conversation together. So I just wanted to lay the framework for that. If you want to do the next slide. So this is our e-learning data. This is our middle school and our high school. We had over 1,400 e-walks in the classroom, and you can see they're broken down up to 9 different categories. And it shows each category, and then it shows whether or not the person that did the observation observed that particular indicator, or it was not observed. And if you look at number 1 up there, that's the standards, right? So are our teachers teaching the standards? And no, we're not at 100%, right? I think I would have expected that, honestly, to be a little higher when we're teaching the standards, especially with our curriculum maps that we have in place. But we were at 78% of the individuals that were observing those classrooms in middle school and high school saw our standards being taught to our students. When you look at indicators 2, 3, and 4, that all boils down to student engagement in the classroom. Are we differentiating instruction? And you can see from the numbers there into the 30s, into the 20s, during those 1,400 observations, during a block scheduling time, we really didn't see the student engagement that you would expect to see for an 84-minute class period. And then 5, 6, and 7, indicators 5, 6, and 7 are all about the depth of knowledge. You know, there are various levels of depth of knowledge. Level 1, which is indicator number 7, that's low level. Who, what, when, where. Those are those type of questions that you'd see. That's why when you saw the number is that 83% of the observations were at level 1. Yes?
Please, how long are they, how long are you all in one classroom before you move on for your walkthroughs?
And so there's a variety. It all depends on what is happening in the lesson. It could be anywhere from 3 minutes to up to a half hour. And it all depends on how long that administrator stays in that classroom. So I can't tell you for the 1,400 different observations, I don't have the exact, what's the average of each of those observations. I could get that for you, but I don't have it.
I'm curious because, well, in 3 minutes, how can you observe all of that?
Exactly.
That's a lot.
Correct. And so we're going to speak about transparency today. And so the real world of inside of a building could be anywhere from 3 minutes, like I said, up to a half hour, depending upon how long that particular administrator chooses to stay in that class.
And I apologize that I went out of what I said we were doing.
You're okay. Free pass. If I had talking chips, I'll give you one. Okay, and then if we look at indicators number 6 and 5, those are level 2 and level 3 and 4 depth of knowledge questions, and those are low percentages. And so this is another piece of data we were looking at as we continue to have these conversations about scheduling. Are we seeing the rigor in the classroom? Are we seeing students being engaged in that extended period of time? And if we are, at what levels are we seeing our students be engaged? So then we looked at with our current teacher time right now, this is current student teacher time, what is the percentage of time that our teachers are in contact with our students? And I'll start on the left. Our elementary teachers, they're about 75.5% of their day. As you could imagine, they have their student-teacher contact time. And then you go to middle school, where there are 2 schedules right now. You have a 6x6 and a 5x5. 6x6 schedule, 62% of the teacher's day is direct in contact with students, and then 59% for the 5x5. And we go to the high school, and 56% of their day, in the current 4x4 model that we have, 56% of their day is teacher-student contact time.
And one of the things that an elementary teacher will probably point out with this is that this doesn't even take into consideration the fact that if I'm an elementary teacher, I'm expected to escort my students to and from specials, to and from the cafeteria, and so that takes out even more additional time. Middle school, I know that when I was in middle school, I made them escort them to the cafeteria. I would assume that's what we're doing, but in high school, that's not the case. They don't escort students to and from electives. They don't escort students to and from the cafeteria.
So those figures, they do not have transition times or lunch times in them, and that's important to note. That's not contact time. Thank you, Dr. Atkins. So then let's look at the data. Of course, we're always talking about where are we with our Big Ten, and then how do we compare it to our neighbors to the north and south of us. And when you look at each of the districts, and right next to the districts are the average total number of points earned on school grade. Then we broke out the middle column, what was the high school components only of that, and then what's the amount of time students are spending in school. So not only do we have the least amount of teacher-student contact time based around the schedule we have now, then we also, when compared to our Big Ten, we're a half hour short. Well, one county has 6 hours, 55 minutes, but the rest of them are all 7 hours. So we're a half hour short compared to districts in which we are measuring ourselves against as well to see how successful we are. So now if we were going to add additional minutes to the student day, none of this is about adding teacher time. We're talking about adding additional minutes for students to the school day. So if we were going to add additional minutes to students in the school day, under the current model we have right now, the 4x4, if we added 30 minutes to that to make it 7 hours, the contact time automatically goes up to 61% by adding that extra half hour on for students. If we were to go to a 7-period, the traditional 7-period day that many of us went to school with, that's teacher-student contact time is 68%. If we go to a blended model, which is Mr. Simmons is going to share with you a variety of different models, so we're going to talk about a blended model as one option, it's at 67%. And then if we go to a 5x5 model, that adds 51 minutes onto a student day. Obviously, that goes up to 71% teacher-student contact time. So these are indicators we keep in front of us as we are having these discussions around the schedule. So here are the four.
Make sure I just want to bring your attention to that last one.
Yeah, that's huge.
Okay. You have 7 hours, 7 hours, 7 hours. The last one is a 51 minutes added to the current student day, and that's 7 hours and 21 minutes, which would give you greater student time relative to the other districts.
Correct. And we're going to go into depth in each of these so that you can see what they look like. So we're going to talk about 4 different models. We're going to talk about the 4x4 model we have right now by adding 30 minutes to the day. We're going to talk about a 7-period day with additional 30 minutes to the student day. We're going to talk about a blended model that adds also the 30 minutes to the student day. And then we're going to talk about a 5x5 model that adds 51 minutes to a student day. Mr. Simmons is going to walk through that. Any questions for me before I turn it over to Mr. Simmons? Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I had a question going back to the EWalk data.
Yes.
Is that, I'm trying to understand the rationale for including that here in this discussion. Is that meant to tell us that, for instance, let's say high school, that if we changed what we're doing now, it would be better? We would have, that's what I'm not understanding,
Sure.
the rationale for this.
We're going to share with you all the data we looked at when we were making the scheduling.
Right.
This is one piece of information, like what are we seeing in the classroom?
But
We're also going to talk about, for example, the amount of time students stay on campus. We're going to talk about elective opportunities. So it was just one piece that while we have this 4x4 right now, while we have this model, what are we seeing administratively? What are we seeing happen in the classroom? Because that was just a piece coupled with the achievement data. And I understand the question you're asking, like what was the intent of that?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my intent was to be.
Is there data that shows, if this were done on a different kind of schedule, that this would come out different?
And I was just painting to pick our current reality. That's all this is, our current reality.
That's what I wanted to
Yes.
understand. And I just wanted to mention one other thing before we move on, since we're in the 4x4 for the high schools. I've heard from a lot of a lot of them are friends that I've worked with, but some of them are people that just reached out to me. And some of them were saying that they have been criticized in the block that they are not making bell-to-bell use of their time. And I was just curious, before we get into this, is that one of the critiques?
So one, obviously, as you've been in high school, you understand the expectation, bell-to-bell instruction, and we want to max, because remember, when the block schedule, you're really teaching 2 days worth of content
Exactly.
during that time. So the expectation would be bell-to-bell, and that it's not meant to be homework time. It's meant to be engage the students in the content, make sure they understand it, reteach it, do some progress monitoring along the way. All of that should occur during the block period. So if a teacher's being critiqued for not teaching bell-to-bell, I think it would be for the principal to say, what is it I need to help fill your toolkit so that you can teach during that 84-minute block period.
Okay, and I'm just wondering if all the teachers have been trained on doing that. I think when I first came to this district, we may have been on a 7-period day, and then soon after went on the 4x4, and it didn't bother me because in Texas I had been on a block, and we had received deep training on the transitions and exactly how you handle that chunk of time. But
there was an
wondering, because I heard this as a generality, that some principals are saying, well, you don't use all those minutes anyway, and that's, whether that's true or not, that's the feeling that's coming out from many of the teachers.
I think regardless of what schedule option we land on, I do think it's incumbent on us as an administrative, as an academic services team, to provide some ongoing professional development to maximize student learning during whatever period of time we decide upon. The research we've all read, we've been reading the research nonstop, and the research is real clear. It's whatever schedule you choose that is best for the students in your building, and that is what happens during that instructional time is what makes the difference for students. And so making sure that our teachers have the tools they need for whatever schedule we decide to land on, that's going to be important. And that work will be with my team to making sure that we do that.
I'm sorry to add something,
Okay.
but you just said a word that made me go, oh. Are we considering having, you said in your building, and you kind of emphasized that word, does that mean we are considering that some schools can choose, some high schools can choose to stay on the block and others? Because I got word from a teacher at one of our schools that said her principal already said to them that they're staying on the block.
Yeah, I could assure you 100%, look you in the eye and tell you there's been no decisions made on the schedule that we're doing.
But are we considering doing,
We've considering,
like some schools doing it one way and some the other?
we're considering all options, honest and truly. We are that's why, for example, this PowerPoint was updated, right? Because as we continue to get feedback from principals, we are listening, we're taking these into our discussions, and we're gonna look what's best for all of our students in the district, not just a small group, but all of our schools. And so that's a piece of the conversation that needs to have. What I was sharing with you was,
More comments on that
Yep.
later, but I'm already saying, if we're not consistent, we're in for big trouble with
and we understand that,
lots of things.
you've been very clear anytime I've been up here about the importance of being systemic across the district, right? And we understand that.
I have, not
Yes.
lockstep, because there are certain considerations for certain buildings, and we do have that with, like, the ESOL, the
Internationals.
at international academies, we have it with the different academies we offer, and lots of other things that we offer. But what I'm thinking of here is the curriculum maps and, you know.
I'll address that.
We're going to talk about all those pieces in the presentation. And I didn't mean to take you off track. I was just sharing with you on what where we were with the research, and that's why I just wanted to share that with you.
It was that emphasis on the
I
word
got you.
building that was like, whoa.
So now I'm going to turn it over to Clayton, and he's going to walk us through a variety of different models as well. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to start with the first one that maybe isn't quite as obvious, but it's called the blended model. And it takes into consideration, when we listen to the concerns of both groups, some that were pro 7-period day and some that were pro model, there were advantages to both and disadvantages to both. In this model, it takes the students for the first block of the day, they see their 60-minute, they see the students 60 minutes every single day. So, you know, in theory, you could think of that as your ELA students that you might want to see their teachers every day. And then in the middle section of the day, they have their traditional 80-minute block every other day. And then on the last period of the day, they go back to a 60-minute block. So you have 2 periods where the teachers would see their students every day for 60 minutes, and then you would have 3 periods rotating that they would have 80 minutes. This option also gives the students 8 options, which is what we have right now. So there would not be a loss of any option. I will let you know that the plan was it would be a 60-minute planning every day, because obviously, you know, you would be inequities if you were the teacher that was off on the 60-minute. So what would happen is they would teach the 60 minutes, and then a 20-minute push-in where they would go into another classroom and assist another teacher or do small group instruction with some of the other, or in some of the, like IB, for example, they could do a pull-out where they assisted them on their 30,000-word essay that they have to write. So this blends 2 models. It takes, it's not perfect, but it does take into consideration some of the things that both groups have talked about. And that was a little bit about discussion. I shared with you this. I will tell you that if you look at the first, it is a 60 minutes of planning, and it does increase the students to an 85.7% of the day, and the teachers are up to a 67% of the contact time. So that was just discussion that I just shared with you on that. And also, if you add in the, I want to give you total. To be perfectly clear, I want to give you total planning time. Now, when you're talking total planning, you would take into consideration the time before and after school. So the total planning time on this option would be 90 minutes if you added the before and after, so the teachers would have 90 minutes of planning every day. Now we're going to get into the 5x5 option. This is the one that came out that would put us at 7 hours and 21 minutes, which would mean that Lee County would have the highest student contact of any of the Big Ten or our neighbors to the north and south. It would be a 4x4 block. You have to go to, the only option that this would work in is if we increased it to a 7-hour student day. I'll explain that, because if you go to a 6.5-hour student day, there isn't enough time during the day for the seat time requirement for credit. So you have to have a minimum of 80 minutes per, if you're doing a block, it has to be a minimum of 80 minutes so that, that the students will be able to have enough time at the end to be able to do it. The beauty of this is up to 2 classes. You could do 2 or 3 depending on what schedule you want to. You can block those students every day. In other words, you could, if you want to do ELA or math, they would have 80 minutes with their teachers every single day. And so that comes to a huge advantage when you look at the amount of time. The teachers are in contact with their students 71% of the day. The student day is 7 hours and 21 minutes. And actually, they are getting academics 90.7% of the day. And this is the big one. This is huge. It's up to 3. It doesn't have to be 3, because we want to continue to give the students 8 options. It's up to, look at the amount of minutes that you have per year in those academics. It's 14,400 minutes, that's a lot of time that, you know, we could utilize. Some of the concerns that we hear from some of our principals are that they feel like that, you know, they're a hamster in a hamster wheel, and they're running so fast, but they're not seeing the gains that they feel like they should see. And they realize that the problem is time. It's time with the kids. So this gives a lot of extra time. Now, it is way out of the box, I will admit, because of that, but I will tell you, when you add up the 80 minutes of planning that they would have, plus the time before and after school, even though it looks crazy, it gives them 89 minutes of planning every day, which is actually only 1 minute less than the previous model. So it doesn't mess with that much, even though they have a lot more additional time in class. This is a current, if we were to add one, Ms. Patrica, you asked this question back. If we were to put in the 7-period day right now with our current 6.5-hour day, what would that look like? So currently the 4.4 or the 4x4 block, we have 84-minute periods. They see those kids 90 class periods, because remember, it's every other day, for a total of 7,560 minutes. If you go to a 7-period day, they're 47 minutes if we were to put it in the current 6.5-hour day. 180 classes, 8,460 minutes. If you take that 47 and divide it back into the amount of extra minutes, it gives them an extra 19 days of instruction per class. So
What are those numbers on the 5x5? Is that in there?
with
It's not, in the same exact metric, 120 additional days.
So on the 5x5, you can't put this in a 6.5-hour day because of the amount, you can't because of the amount of time.
Never mind.
Well, you'll see that. I think we added it to the next slide. Okay, so a comparison, this is adding the 30 minutes. No, you don't see the 5x5. We can get that, though. The 4x4, if you add the 30 minutes, they would go to a 92-minute block. It's 8,280 minutes. 7-period day is 51 minutes per period times 180. It's 9,180. Then we'll go to the bottom. You're dividing a different number. It's 51 instead of 47, so you get 17 additional days of instruction on that model. And then the blended schedule, the one that you had the 2 periods in, it goes to 10,800 minutes. If you look, that's more than what you would get on the other one. And then the 90 minutes are 7,200 minutes. And that's an increase of, in two of the classes. You can go up to 3, but 2 of the classes you would see every day. So that gives the advantage of seeing the teachers every day.
One of the things I would just want to mention, just so everybody's aware about the planning requirement that the district has per the collective bargaining agreement. That's Article 7. Teachers shall have planning conference time totaling not less than 60 minutes per day, or the equivalent on a weekly basis, to include a minimum of 40 continuous minutes per teacher day, except in cases referenced in Article 7.01, et cetera. So the reason I point that out is just so we are aware of what the actual collective bargaining agreement states as it relates to planning, which is different. The amount of planning that you see at the secondary level is significantly more than what's in that agreement.
All right, I got way ahead of myself on my notes. I was just going off the screen. All right, so where we are next is we're going to talk about the considerations. When we talk to people, we boiled it down to a few of the considerations and the benefits. The 4x4, it reduces the number of class changes. That gives them the 8 options. Flexibility at our international centers because of the 8 options. Gives them 2 days to complete the homework, even though we tell them all the time, don't do that. Do it the night of because it gets confusing. Longer uninterrupted block of time, and then additional time for lab setup. Some of the implications, it's difficult in a lot of cases to keep the kids engaged for 84 minutes. I have problems paying attention for 84 minutes, so you have to have some good strategies, which we already talked about. No matter what model we fall on, we're going to be dealing with the engagement strategies and utilizing some brain breaks. So it reduces the teacher contact time with students to 61%. Attendance is an issue because if you miss one day, you end up missing 2 classes because remember, it's two days of instruction in the class. And some of those weird weeks where you have 4-day weeks, if you miss one day, you're missing 50% of the instruction for the week. So you actually only see the teacher once that week, and then you don't see them again until the next week.
The other issue that we run into with some of the testing schedule and the makeup is when those things get scheduled in, sometimes that also takes away from a student being able to receive 2 or 3 of the classes that they normally would be seeing during a block schedule. So that's just something I really hadn't considered. It has a larger impact than one might imagine, or you might think about, particularly at the high school level, is where you see that the most.
So it has less built-in brain breaks, obviously, because we're a lot big blocks of time. And then in the case of many of our schools already, I will let you know, and I can get the exact numbers on this, which I will ask for. A lot of our teachers are already teaching 7 of 8 because we're struggling to hire teachers now. So we get a lot of requests for them to teach 7 of 8. So a lot of our teachers are already teaching the 7 of 8. We also have, one of the side effects of this is an increased, it's called a flex period, where the students are off campus. So I'll show you the data. we just pulled this, and the data shows that if you look at the last, we'll go all the way to the right, that right now 47% of our seniors have at least one day off campus, or one period off campus. And some of them, if you divide that in half, that number would be 2 off-campus periods. So if you can look at the schools, we go anywhere from 68% at Fort Myers to 21% at Cape. And remember, these are the number of kids that are off campus. It's not OJT, it's that they choose not to come for 1 or 2 periods a day.
So I think that graph, and we told you we're going to be transparent with our data, and we think that graph's important because as we talk about elective opportunities for students, when it comes to their senior year, you can look at the number of students that are taking advantage of, the senior waiver, and they're off for at least 1 class period during a block schedule time. So we think that's an important piece of the story as we continue to analyze this.
All right, the considerations for a 7-period day with the additional 30 minutes. The benefits are it does increase the contact time to 68%. One of the big ones that we hear over and over again is the contact time with their teachers every day. They get to see their teachers every day. Make up work in attendance. If you miss 1 day, you're only missing 1 day of class time. You get more built-in breaks. That can be bad too because that's 6 changes. But they are getting up and getting some blood flowing. And it does it reduces the number of courses required. So in theory, it would reduce the number of flex periods by the time we got to the senior year. Implications, time for parent-teacher conferences, time for PLCs, time for faculty meetings, and then reduce elective options. It does take them down. Reduce time setting up labs. However, after talking to some science teachers, they actually thought this might be good because they can set up the lab 1 day and then do the lab the following day because they're in the class twice the amount of time. Additional class changes, and then possibility of additional homework. And what that means is that you think about it, you can get seven periods worth of homework rather than the 4.
Yeah, another thing, if we take us back to that other chart, the one previous to this, just another thing for some of our students, they may not be electing to take that period off, but one of the concerns that is with these students, if you are, like, let's say you're at a comprehensive high school, but you're not in one of those academies for whatever reason. You may start it in one, and you thought, well, this is not an interest, and you're no longer in an academy, and you're barred from being able to do AP coursework because you're of your FSA score, then what happens is you are very, very limited in terms of what electives that you can take. So you end up filling them. And that was something that we did talk to the principals about, and they said, in those cases, at some of our schools, like if you're not in the IB program or you're not in one of the comprehensive career academies, which some of our regular kids are not, then that's where you get into the situation where you're just trying to pull electives to fill a schedule, or you're flexing it like you see here.
It's fun.
What's the argument against having seniors graduate mid-year their senior year, or even if they're ready, graduating at the end of the
We do have a number of them that do graduate halfway through their senior year.
Okay, so I'm just brainstorming here on the senior flex class, because I can tell you that's a huge problem, because the kids, especially if it's first period, I don't think schools should allow them to take off first period, because then they never come. But anyway, what is the argument? Why would it be beneficial, or is there an argument against having more seniors graduating mid-year, their senior year, and not allowing them to do the senior?
We're not arguing for seniors not to take advantage of their opportunities to graduate when they're ready. Again, this is just a piece of the data. I would prefer that students were taking the most rigorous courses. We just had one of our principals come back from the University of Florida, and they said, it was a missions officer, and said, if you want to get into UF and you're not taking a rigorous course your senior year, your application is not going to be considered. And so it's on us to really make sure that our students, you understand how that works, our students are taken.
I do, because they look at that last semester.
Well, I'm concerned about, if you look at, and I'm sure you all are as well, but if you look at our university graduation rate, if you go to FGCU and look at their graduation rate and the number of freshman students that are unsuccessful and drop out of college, the numbers are alarming. And these are talented students that were able to get accepted into some of these schools, but then they get into a rigorous course and they're just not prepared for the rigors of college life. And so, I think that if we do put more rigor in at the high school level, then that would better prepare them for their freshman year at university or college.
And I do want to say, we're not here advocating one schedule or the other today for any of you. We are really here just sharing with you where we are right now in the discussion and what we have discovered during our journey. Because as we keep talking about more schedules, we keep digging and asking why. Well, why is this? Why is that? Which is why we keep coming up with more data, which is why we felt it was important to share that journey with you.
Yeah, which is why I asked
Absolutely.
what the argument is, because I've heard different arguments from different teachers on this, and it would seem that if we do if we stick with a 4x4, that we would really, it behooves us to add more career classes and other classes. For instance, students take English 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, why don't we have more, specialized literature classes or writing classes or, different things that are not just art, or the worst thing in the world when you have a senior taking 3 PE classes.
Yeah, agreed.
That happened.
That happens. One of the things that we're talking, when you look at the PLCs, we had talked about PLCs and we had talked about teacher conferences. All of our elementary schools do parent-led conferences as it is right now. That's something option that, getting way out of the box, we could possibly do that in high school. Also, one of the big pushes next year, irregardless of the model that we go to, is having common planning, and specifically in our tested areas, because that is something that we really need to do. And then that will continue with the PLCs during the day, which a lot of us feel is a better option anyway than doing it in the afternoon. Also, that would allow, if there was pertinent information the principal needed to share, you can either do that virtually or tape it rather than the traditional principal meeting, or you could meet with small groups during the day if it was something that was vital. All right, for the blended, this is back to the considerations for the blended schedule. You increase teacher contact time to 67%. You'd have daily academics in 2 core classes. There would be 8 student options. It allows for the students for the ACE and IB students to continue with their 8 options. Implications are the same ones exactly. You would have 1 additional class change, and then we already talked about the time for the parent conferences. That's not really changing in any of these models. Considerations for a 5x5, we go up to 71%. This would be we'd be the top dog of the 10 districts and our neighbors to the north and south. Gives them daily courses in up to 3 classes. Maximizes student time. Of course, then we go back to the same thing. It gives them 1 additional class change, parent conferences, and faculty meetings. All right, so we hear a lot from, about the electives for our ACE students, or our ACE students and our IB students specifically, so I want to talk to you about some options that we came up with. But I think it's fair to talk about, let's talk about the size of how many students actually get the ACE diploma or the IB diploma. Now, there are a number of kids that go into the program, that start in the program, but they do not complete it. They take the curriculum, but they don't necessarily get the diploma. But when you look at the actual number of last year, we had 5,245 graduates. 212 of those 5,000 graduate with an ACE diploma, and 240 graduate with their IB diploma. So you're actually talking barely over 8% of our student population. And remember, we're trying to do what's best for all 31,000 kids. And
We're going to let Ms. Patriga.
Yeah, does this reflect kids who are engaged in IB or ACE and work really hard for 4 years and are unable to gain the diploma because they don't pass the test?
Correct.
And does this include IBCP at Dunbar?
This is not the IBCP data. This is for the certificate itself, graduating with the IB certificate. And these are not reflective of students who are taking the course. They take the class but can't pass the test. That's not in this data. This is for those students that have completed all the way through. Of course, you know, I am an open door person. I really feel like we should expose our students to as many rigors as possible. So this piece of data is not saying that we should not be offering these courses because the percentage for graduation is low. What I wanted to share with you is, you know, as people talk to you about IB and ACE opportunities, we just want you to get a general sense when we're talking about all students, we mean all students. And so at the upper end of the echelon, and also our students that struggle academically as well, we try to take all of that into account. But I thought it was important that we shared with you the number of students that do graduate with those diplomas.
No, I get it. I just don't think this data accurately reflects the number of students in those programs.
no, it doesn't. And we're actually going to increase the number of students as we move forward. We're going to increase the ACE diploma. Yeah, we wanted the kids in the rigorous curriculum, and that would help address the issue of fluff in their senior year. We want to keep it rigorous all the way through. I think that's going to benefit all of our kids no matter what when they're going to go to either a technical school, trade school, or to college.
Ms. Patriga, you were right. I mean, there are a myriad of students that are enrolled in these programs, and that number does not reflect those that are enrolled in the coursework. It was just the completers.
All right, we're going to talk. We hear a lot about the electives for our ACE and IB students. So, I wanted to talk to you. We'll start with the ACE first. You know, we talked to what we did to get this process. We looked at schools that were similar to the ones that we have. We talked to the state coordinators in both ACE and IB, and then we thought way out of the box to bring options back to the table. With ACE, what we found out is we talked to Don Myers. He's the state head. There's a lot of successful ACE schools that are 7-period days. So the electives in the ACE curriculum is not a problem. You can see there are some examples of the schedule, and all of them, no matter what, they add plenty of opportunities for electives when you do the ACE curriculum. And it's mainly because of the way that the program is set up and it's spread out more. So you can see there's one that there's electives all the way through, and then electives all the way through. Now when you look at this data, what you're not going to see in the IBs, you're not going to see freshman, sophomore. And in ACE, you're not going to see freshmen, and that's because they're not actually in the program at that point. So there is more elective options for them in those years. Okay, IB, what we did is we talked to the state coordinator of IB, and we got some recommendations on that. And then we looked at 2 similar schools that are currently at a 7-period day. One of them is at Riverview High School, and that is in Sarasota County, and it is actually an IB and art school. So the first 3 options you're going to see are options that we came up with after we talked with Renee Ihart. She's the state coordinator for IB, and these are options that we actually came up with. So, and I'll share those options with you. And the whole point is to help make sure that our IB kids, one of the arguments we've got from them, or the biggest argument, is that of not having an elective, which I do understand. You know, I had 2 sons in the IB program at Fort Myers, and that was rough. So, you know, it's important to all of us that they continue to have those options. So on the option 1, what you're going to see is that what the students do is they have 3 SL courses and 3 HL courses. The HL courses span over 2 years. And then you have a TOK class, which is a theory of knowledge, which you must take part of it your junior year, and you must take part of it your senior year. That is a requirement from IB. In option 1, the students would test out of one of their SL courses, which would then you would have a theory of knowledge. And one of the things that they do at a number of different high schools is they have something called a seminar course, where once a month they pull the kids out for 4 hours. And a lot of the schools really like this model because it is more in line of what the kids are actually going to see when they go to college. It's going to provide them some stamina in a 4-hour course. And it's in a seminar model like you would go if you were in college to do a seminar. So they would do the seminar for the theory of knowledge. That gives them their elective back. They had one elective before. They would still have the elective. And then their senior year, they would go back to taking their theory of knowledge face-to-face, and then they would still have an elective. So you have continued to give them an elective on that model. That's model 1. You go to model 2, they have the option of testing out of 2 of their SL courses. We would continue with the theory of knowledge seminar just like we did in the first model. It would give them an elective, and then their senior year it would actually give them 2 electives. So it gives them and this actually gives them an additional option. And then you go to option 3. And I talked to some of it was interesting, at Cape High, I talked to some of the parents, and they really liked this model. They would go ahead and take their 3 SL, and this is over their junior and senior year. And then they would take their elective courses both years, and they would take theory of knowledge virtually. So we would do it through LVS, and they could take it through LVS. This also gives them an option to have their elective both their junior and senior year. Then you go to model 4. This is actually what they are doing at Riverview, because we asked them. And Riverview, they do it a little differently. They take their 3 SL, 3 HL, and then they have their theory of knowledge, and they take theory of knowledge every other day. So it's every other day. And then they take their elective every other day. It gives them a 0.5 elective credit over the course of 1 year. So this is what they are doing. I just wanted to give you an example of a school that was on a 7-period day that was doing an elective. So there are 4 options that we could do in a 7-period day and still continue to give our IB students an elective. Some of the things that we still heard were, worries about the arts, some of the academies, and dual enrollment. What we did is we worked with Rita Davis, and she's working with all of the academies to ensure that we would continue to do all of the academies at the high schools, and that is the case right now. We also can get creative with scheduling. In a 7-period day, there's no reason why you can't take period 4 and 5 and block them together for some of our medical academy students or students that needed additional time. So that's what we did. We also, I had a conversation with Dr. Santini about the fact that, one thing we could look at is, to give them options. I hate the fact that sometimes our band kids can't be in the band. And, at Estero, I always allowed the kids, if there wasn't room in their schedule, to be able to be in the marching band because they practice after school. And they could still participate with the band. Now, he is looking into the fact of whether they can go to the state competitions not being in the class, but there are kids that would be able to still participate in band and march with the students. And also, I checked with dual enrollment. Some people mentioned dual enrollment. Dual enrollment is not an option. We can give kids dual enrollment at any point in any schedule that we do. So dual enrollment is always an option for our students.
Thank you, Clayton. So any questions about high school? I know that was a lot to digest. That was a lot of information, and hopefully we had time to look at this ahead of time. We tried to be thoughtful and put a lot of this information in the notes section of each of the slides. And so hopefully you'll get a chance to go back and look at that, and then feel free to ask us follow-up questions I'm sure you're going to have. But anything burning right now that you would like to ask Clayton regarding high school scheduling options?
So if we're really worried about kids, we need to have, at some point, a larger discussion about school start times. I know this isn't what we're talking about right now, but really the only reasons why we don't change school start times are about political considerations, not what's best for kids. So we need to be thinking about that at some point in the future. I have a million questions. Is it better for me to sit with them, or do you want me to ask those questions now?
We are fine to sit with each one of you individually and answer your questions if you like, or whatever your pleasure is, but we will make ourselves available to all of you.
Well, could you possibly send them the questions, and just like Lauren, how she sends everything out to us, share that all with us, so, because we may have the same questions.
That's what I was going to say.
And then that way it will eliminate us re-asking all the same questions.
All right, without asking my questions, I have to tell you that I love the 5x5, because I feel like that one, but there's some slides in here that don't reflect the 5x5. Like those last slides you just did showing me what the courses would be over the junior and senior year, I don't have that to look at.
So the reason, oh, you didn't have that in your presentation?
wasn't, it's not here. Is it?
Well, I will tell you that the 5x5 came out of the conversation with the principals last Thursday, so this was as of Friday. We were reworking some of this.
And that was the other thing that I wanted to mention was I think that, no, I mean, what a schedule will look like for kids, those last slides. I think that Candace, I think that you put a tremendous amount of work into this over the weekend, and I know that you're responding to criticism and concerns, and I'm very appreciative of the work that you're putting in. And please don't take my questions as criticisms. They just really are concerns, and I really want to make sure we make the right decision.
We want all the questions up front, right? We want to make the best decision for our kids as well. So we are not, this whole team up here, and including Dr. Atkins, we're not taking any of this personal. We'd rather you ask the questions and have us dig if we needed to.
I will tell you that generally speaking, when we sit and we have these discussions, you guys give us data about the district, and then you give us data about the lowest 25, but I don't ever get data about the top 25. And I feel like that if we're talking about all kids, we really have to be talking about all kids. And we don't often talk about that when we're sitting at this table. So just for future consideration, please.
And I think that we always miss the middle people,
Yeah,
middle
well,
kids. Go ahead, Ms.
So I actually am going to piggyback off of what Ms. Patricia just said. We haven't really had a discussion about a later start time, and that is something that that I was doing some research on all this, and that really popped up. California's start time is 8:30 for high school, and they say that the outcome shows that the attendance and enrollments rates are better, reduced tardiness, better mental health and mental health outcomes even, and as also the well-being, and it even reduces the substance abuse. So I would love to have seen a little piece of that. I know that people would probably have a cow if they thought that class wasn't going to be till 8:30 and high schoolers weren't going to school till 8:30.
We're already talking about extending the school day and looking at scheduling options. Now you want me to put in there changing the start times too?
You can't do that now, that's a huge.
I know, and so, but I think it's something that we need to be, we just need to have a little conversation about and be aware of it.
I will tell you, this team is aware of it. The conversation, in our department, actually, our division has occurred. Obviously, we're well aware of the research as well. There's a lot of moving pieces with changing the start time of school and a lot of considerations. I do think it definitely warrants a longer conversation.
And just Dr. Savage and his team has also been working on this for quite some time. I think somebody shared an article with what was going on in Miami-Dade, and so he has been on that ever since. And I don't, at some point we can share that information, because I think, Miami-Dade is still a work in progress over at that particular district. So it's not as, I don't know, Dr. Savage, if you want to just kind of give them an update.
Not a dissertation, Dr. Savage.
Yeah, that'll be
Really just basically saying it's exciting to hear that consideration at our board level. That said, there's way too much detail to go into in the time that we already have, and there's still more to come for the middle school side. So with respect to that side, but yes, we'd be very excited to hear and to present to you what we have found. But I would always say, if everything, it's a balancing act. There's always concessions. There's no magic bullet, so just be aware of that, and that there isn't just a magical schedule that's a perfect solution for everything. There's just, what are you willing to trade in its place? And I think I'd leave you with that.
And I would like to say, just because the three of us are sitting up here and Candace is right here to provide the support for us, just because we're the face of this right now, I want to tell you there's been a lot of work cross-divisionally with every one of the chiefs, led by our superintendent, who's empowered all of us to look at these options. And so this really has been a cross-divisional conversation that we've had. Okay, Ms. Mayor, middle school.
I had
I'm sorry, Ms. Vaughn, my apologies.
One quick question on this. We're thinking about doing this next year, right? The next school year?
Yes, ma'am.
How, if we decide to go, or you decide to go to a 7-period day, how many hours is that going to take to change the curriculum maps? How many hours is it? I mean, any which way, the bus schedules are going to have to be different. It almost seems to me, and I know you said you've been talking about it since August, but that at this point, we're not really at the point of rolling this out for next year and having the curriculum maps. And if that is the case, have we budgeted for the people that are going to have to come in and work on those?
So I'm going to let Candace talk about the
Candace,
curriculum
okay.
maps, and then if Mr. Savage wants to talk about transportation, because all these conversations have been happening at the same time.
So for the curriculum maps and instructional guides, as we've been planning this conversation, every time we look and we make updates, we go, how does this implicate for next year? So with it, any of these schedules that we have, it just adjusts the block time that's on our instructional guides. The instructional guides were laid out by standards. So regardless of the schedule that we're on, we're just updating one cell in each one of those of how long it would take. It's also what allows us, that a question you had earlier, the way we came across Miami-Dade running multiple schedules is on their curriculum maps, they have a block and it says how many blocks of time, and then they have traditional and how many traditional days. So that is a model we looked at that we can do the same exact thing with our instructional guides. So regardless of the model where we land, it's feasible for our teams. It's also feasible with our reading programs. So reading programs are very scripted for how long students are expected to be in each station. We've mapped all of those pieces out, so once a decision is made, we're not working behind the 8 ball. We've been very proactive in this, thinking about what are those implications. So we are already down those roads. It's just a myriad of which one are we going to land with and how will that look for next year.
Would you be having classroom teachers coming in to work on the updates on the maps?
So one of the nice parts with the curriculum maps and instructional guides and leading and learning is they've been giving us feedback all year as is with the feedback button and then our face-to-face since we meet with them once a quarter. So any adjustments that need to be made to pacing are already in the works. So for specific content being updated, those pieces are already being considered. So it's just a matter of changing. I would need 4 blocks, which would equal 8 traditional days. That's the part that will need to be changed, so we're not looking at a whole revamp of our work.
Yeah, it's not going to translate exactly, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and then we have our progress monitoring, so that'll be like our dipstick. So almost at a school when we're asking teams to plan together, if we're all one PLC, our students' needs are different, but we all agree by this date, we're gonna give this assessment so we can look at data collectively. We can do the same pieces with our progress monitoring. So while our days may not line up exactly to your point, we do have dipsticks where we'll be able to look across the district and say, how are we doing as a whole?
Well, and of course, common planning, let's say all the English 4 teachers have second period off, that eliminates second period for that course, which log jams some other things as well. Of course, it's not going to be as log jammed on a 7-period day as it is on a 4x4, but those are considerations.
And our APCs have been aware of.
But adding in, so that sounds good, like you're on top of it, but so then the biggest piece to be added in between now and August is the buzzword.
And now, Dr. Savage.
Time that school, yes, I know, the BUS, that.
As soon as we heard about the additional 30 minutes, that was a viable consideration, the team immediately went to work on putting together actual plausible options that really could work. And that, again, was not really anything about the actual schedule consideration, just the additional 30 minutes that were now going to be added for the students. So I will say that the caveat to that is, with the 5x5 and the additional lengthening of that student day, that would have to be mirrored against it. This was literally taking feedback from principals on Friday, translating that into an immediate way to try to satisfy some of their concerns about loss of teacher planning, loss of student electives, maximizing student time. So I think for us in transportation, as any of our support services, when our primary mission is to educate kids and drive a significant value, we will do anything within our power to try to put together a game plan that works.
So that sounds great, but we're still at, and I'm going back to what was just said about start times and what Ms. Patrica and Ms. Giovanelli said. I mean, that's been for years and years and years that we know it's the worst thing ever So I'm hoping, I'm not going to hear that those kids, that first period bell is going to ring before 7 o'clock.
Now, that was a hard stop for us, was off the table was anything before 7 o'clock. So all of our planning, all the efforts that we had, every proposal under every condition, none of them exceeded 7 o'clock as a start time, as a hard stop. Now, that said, any additional thoughts about changing the levels and when they go to school, those aren't options. This was strictly to serve the high school need and then to adjust it to pivot to also be able to include a middle school potential lengthening, which will be displayed.
Middle school kids might make it home for dinner.
And I think that's the key. There's concessions to all these different pieces.
It sounds facetious, but I'm being serious.
I know that.
They might make it home for dinner.
Well, we do have viable options that don't substantially alter what you're currently looking at. I would say that we don't have anything that is so substantially altering, but again, that excludes the 5x5. That's something that we'd have to do some more work. But with the work the team has already done, and if there were a clear message from the board about a particular level and time frame that they want us to work within, there's nothing, I wouldn't put anything past this team.
So the point here is the 7-hour student day has been part of his planning effort already. That they've given at least 2 options that I have seen.
Correct.
The other thing that I think is important, there was an article in the paper that talked about smaller vehicles, except they've already worked on a plan to implement something like that for next year, which will also decrease ride time on some of these, because if you have to go pick up a kid out on a barrier island, that's part of a route that makes some of those longer ride times. If you can use this Greenbelt project, I think that will also help us achieve the goal of being able to alter these schedules in such a way that we can continue to have on-time arrival, but also increase the student day.
That's right.
I'm all in favor of increasing the student day, but let's get real. We got to get the kids there.
Well, we wouldn't bring you an option if it weren't viable. And again, we didn't, in about 2 weeks' time, we were able to completely flip our current system, working across our transportation department with routers directly to actually produce a feasible schedule that would work. We have that. That's already done in place. The only additional change, the only thing additional that we would have to continue to work before we could bring a plan forward to you all would be essentially if you were to pursue something such as the 5x5. That would
Increasing the student day to 7 hours and 21 minutes.
Or changing when the start time is. Those would be the
Here.
things. Correct.
Can you send us some of the options just so we can?
From a transportation standpoint? Well, the challenge, I think, in our case is that, it would, here's the negative. As I said, everything has a trade-off, right? So what that would necessitate is certain schools would have to change their start times. And that can be something that is, has repercussions in the community. Folks are excited to send their kids to a particular school, may have even selected a particular school with a start time in mind. And so that would have to be a concession, is that in order to do this, we would have to adjust certain school start times to move them to, some of the late start elementary schools to an early start, or vice versa. Those are things that we've already done. We've already mapped them out, at least an initial draft of those pieces. But we would, if we were to get a green light on one particular path, then we would continue to make sure that we customize that path so that it is the best case
You're
scenario.
not ready to share them.
Well, it's like clay, and we have the bulk of it done, the logic of it, it's done. And again, we don't route typically at this time anyways. We wouldn't have, right in this moment in time, we wouldn't necessarily have all those things completed. So it's a natural part of that planning process. But what I would say is we're not going to take it and go so far in depth when each of these models, if it becomes clear that some of them aren't really in contention for deeper consideration. And the thing that you mentioned right before I came up here of flipping a start time and along those lines, if that was something that you were looking at, that would certainly be another major consideration that we could try to fold into this problem-solving effort. So I just want to make, but I don't want you to think that we haven't thought about those things and that we would say, now how do we make it work? It's a significant effort. It's just we don't want to, with respect to our community, we don't want to upset folks giving them information before it's at that point.
And you'll be back to share all this with us again?
That's correct. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep, absolutely.
I believe Ms. Giovanelli has a question,
I
Dr.
just had a
Savage.
question to you, it's just general. I think the proximity that we're working on, I think that will aid in all of this.
Absolutely.
So, but, it's just going to all weigh in, and I think it's just a work in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now Ms. Mayer is going to share with you about the middle school. Ms. Mayer?
All right. Glad to be able to share with you this afternoon. We're showing you on the chart the Big Ten comparison, and if you just compare us with the Big Ten, we'd be in third place in the middle level in our district. So do an amazing job. When you pull in Charlotte and Collier, that puts us at 5th place. And I'm going to tell you some of the, and that's even with us having the least amount of time. But that's contact time with the teacher, that they're engaged with students. But most of us as principals in the middle level have already, because we don't have the constraint that high school does. High school has a seat time, they have to be in every class, electives, everything. We don't have that same constraint at the middle level. So what we were able to do years ago, when I first went to Benita, I'm going to tell my story, I had great teachers. I met them when I was hired there, and they were fabulous. They were doing everything they could to help those students learn, everything. They just didn't have the amount of time they needed. They saw them every other day on a 4x4 block, and it just wasn't working. So we went to a 5x5 my first year in, and the story's great. Those teachers had more time with the students, smaller class size, because the size of the school is the same. You're just dividing them instead of between 4 periods. Now you're dividing them, 3 periods, you're dividing them between 4 periods. So it gave them less students in each class, and you all know that wonderful story was we went from held harmless from a D, where we were at a C, to an A that first year. I couldn't have changed anything. It was the teachers and supporting them and giving them the time. It was being strategic. When I looked at this data and saw how little time we had with students, I knew that was the problem. Based on research, we've got to spend time with them. So that page speaks volumes, and we're asking for 15 more minutes, and we hope you consider that. That will be workable in our transportation, they're telling us. Ken has been working very diligently on it, and so we think that can happen for us. Went to Harns Marsh. This year, we have gone to a 6x6. That didn't come from me this time. It was Dr. Galbraith out at Trafalgar Middle School. And he said, look, Linda, if we do this, our level 1s and level 2s will have the opportunity for more electives, because right now they're in double blocks of reading. And I'm going to show you some schedules, so we'll go through it, and I'll go through quickly, okay? So if you'll go to the next one. Here's some benefits of those extra 15 minutes. Kind of like elementary school, the kids are already on our campus and we have to hold them somewhere. High schools, it's a little different. They drive in at the last minute, sounds like from Ms. Vaughn. They come in after the last minute and come into class late. Well, we don't have that. Parents drop them off and they're already sitting on our campus, and we're controlling them in courtyards. One of the schools houses them in like a PE area outside. On rainy days, they have to make accommodations. Some of you are shaking your head. You know that. It's a safety issue. So this would get them into school and into class a little quicker. They would have a staggered time of going to class, so you're not opening the door and 900 children trying to come through the doors. And so those things help. It staggers breakfast. Not that there's assigned time, but as they get there, they eat and then they go on to class. Increased instructional time, of course. We'll add minutes to every one of our schedules, whichever one we move forward with. We'll have more additional instruction time, more time for enrichment and intervention. And you'll notice I put in intervention, there first, but the enrichment part is key. Key to this, to have time for us to do those activities that take the deeper learning, okay? These are some requirements for middle schools this next year. ELA classes daily. That was across the board in almost every school already, but there were a few schools just not there. They were linking their reading and ELA, and so this next year they were all in consensus. We looked at data, we looked at the the scatter plot, and we saw, okay, we do need ELA daily. Math daily is in every school already in the middle school level, so that's not a change. Reading classes dailies for 1s and 2s. Currently in every school it's all level 1s, but next year they all felt that with the data, our job at middle level is to get them ready for high school. We can't send them not ready to go. Hopefully, eventually, if we get our job done really tight, and we're number 1 in the state, the high schools won't have to worry about the reading problem. That's my goal, and I'm driven to that. Dr. Atkins, I think this is our 3rd year that he's required every level 3, 4, and 5 to have reading minimally at least every other day. The data showed, and he had that data, that we were going backwards. We were losing children. Our level 3s were dropping to level 2s. So he put that in place, and he said, no, this is no wiggle room on that. So we're staying with that again in 3, 4s, and 5s. And most of our principals, if they move to the 6x6, we have about 8 on 6x6 now, and the rest of ours, so we have 2 different schedules running because we wanted to look at the data, and the others are running a 5x5. So what we're thinking about, some of those schools are saying, hey, I'm going to put my 3s on daily and enrich them, push them, so when they do leave here, they're on higher level than they came in at. Health, we're really concerned about making sure that that's taught, either it's a semester course. If the school, we're trying to get all of our teachers, our principals to hire a health teacher, so the kids do have more electives. If it's a year-long course, it takes away an elective. So we're trying to get them to do that. Most schools already have a health teacher. Mental health lesson throughout the school year, so this is a requirement. We are standardizing ours, just to let you know, so that by the quarter they cover the same lessons, because we do have a very mobile district and our students change schools, and we don't want them to miss any opportunities with those lessons. District L25 intervention class during the school day. Now, we've all put things after school. I did it myself when I was a principal and said, okay, your intervention class is after school. They don't show up. I can't control anything other than the 6.5 hours, hopefully 6 hours of, a little bit longer, time that I have with them, I can't control anything but what I have in the school day. So our District L25 students, we're requiring them to be in some type of support class this next year. Now, I was in a principal meeting, and we all know the data, and I'm like, I know this will work. Everybody's L25s in your school, you're going to give them some support. I had several principals say, mine are level 3s. So when we went and pulled the data, it's your lowest 25. So if you're a school that's high performing, they don't have level 1s, they don't have level 2 students, or very few. In the District L25, they might have 17 students in their school. So we had to go back and say, okay, who do we need to support? The number 3 says Tier 3 schools have core classes daily. We met after the principal meeting. We talked, and they all agreed they're going on a 6x6 schedule. They're working with budget, as you saw in budget's presentation earlier, of supporting our Tier 3 schools. Dr. Atkins has made it a meeting, I think it's once a quarter, that he meets with Tier 3 principals, and they're very passionate about helping these students. On a 6x6, with the support of additional staff, we're going to try to drill down and fill those gaps before they ever get to high school with an additional reading, additional math on their level wherever they're at. So that's our goal for those students, and budget has put that in their program. Next one. Here's a consideration for a 555, but with the additional 15 minutes. You can see on this one, if you're a below proficiency student, you will only have 1 elective because they're filling the gap, that other period, with in reteaching of whatever standards, whatever they haven't mastered. So they would only have 1 elective. If they're a level 1 or 2 and they're not the L25 bucket, then they would have 2 electives if they're not proficient. On this one, you'll also notice that period 5, 6, and I just made a mock schedule, they would have science and social studies every other day. So with the high school talking about doing a blended schedule, we've been doing this in the middle school. So it's you can do it. It's work, but it's the right thing to do for students. So it can happen. So it's been done. On our meets or exceeds, they have 3 electives on this schedule because they have reading every other day. They don't have it every day. Next one. 6x6 with 15 additional minutes. You see our below proficiency students there. Everybody in orange, you'll see they have social studies and science every day. So think about that on a block, that these are 57 minutes. Every day they're getting that language arts. Every day they're getting that math. Their electives flip-flop. Again, I kept asking Clayton, and why don't you just do what we do? And I don't know how many times he'd had to tell me, it's seat time, Linda, in high school. It's seat time. Whether it's an elective or core class, it's seat time. So again, they have the option of 1 or 2 electives if they're below proficiency. Meets or exceeds, they would have 3 electives. And the next one. Here's a 7-period day because Dr. Spiro did ask me, and a couple of principals said, let's look at a 7-period day. If the high school's going to that, why don't we consider that? Well, it's because because of that, not that seat time needed, we're already blocking our students every day. So we'd lose time because these classes are only 48 minutes. So you're adding additional electives in there. Even though it says 1 or 2 electives, it's really 2 to 4 because those are year-long electives there on that, and they could do semester electives. So they could have as many as 4 electives on a 7-period day. So that's our option for period 7. Here I did a comparison of the 3 schedules, and you have that in front of you. And if you look straight across, the biggest eye-opener, if we look at our students that are level 1, these are students that are missing, they're in our L25 district population. If we're on a 7-period day, they meet for 792 minutes in those core class. If they're on a 5x5, it'd be 931 and a half hours, and on a 6x6, with the minutes being 57, they'd have 940 minutes of instruction. Our students that need it the most are going to get it the most. And as principals, when we voted, every single principal was on a 6x6 when they looked at the data and saw what they could do for students. They were all 100% at this last principal meeting. We had one principal who does her own modified schedule, which is really a 6x6, but she does an enrichment intervention at the very beginning of her day, so it's a different setup, but it's still, she runs a 5x5, but that's not part of the 5x5 because the kids are not scheduled into a class. They're constantly moving based on what they need, okay? So if you can look down through there.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mayor. Any questions about middle school?
It's a no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, trusting that our staff can handle transportation, which I do trust them that they
Yes.
can. This is really a no-brainer. A lot of work to create the no-brainer, and I'm appreciative of that, but it's a no-brainer. Just promise me you'll come to my house and tell my kids
Yes, ma'am.
that you're adding 15
She will literally make a personal visit.
Personal visit.
Because it's been very unpleasant. The conversations have been very unpleasant. You'd swear that.
Extra 15 minutes?
Oh, for everything.
Oh.
Every change you're
Okay.
planning to make next year is going to cause them to, their heads to pop off.
So we know our teachers are working hard.
Yes.
They are working very hard. And our goal is just to try to maximize student learning by increasing opportunities for our students. None of what we shared here today is anything negative on our teaching staff. This is my 28th, 29th year in the school district. My kids graduated through the school district as well. I feel very fortunate to have come up to this school district, so I know our teachers are working hard, and we have some amazing students in our school, but would be remiss if we didn't continue to really dig and see what are the best opportunities that maybe we have missed for our students as we continue to work on increasing opportunities for them. So that is our presentation. We tried to be thoughtful in sharing everything with you that we had as we were going on our journey with our principals and our superintendent. We certainly can entertain any other questions you may have.
Ms. Morgan?
So, no questions. I just want to say that for someone who hasn't been in the school in decades, the presentation of material was fantastic. It was very easy for me to read through and really understand what it was you were trying to accomplish. So all I can say is thank you very much for the background material you gave us, because it really did help me come in and listen and understand what you're going after. So
Thank you.
I just want to say that I feel more excited or more hopeful today for the potential for progress for our students than I have felt since my time on the board, and I think that's the case because of the talent you have surrounded yourself with. So, thank you. Exciting, very
Just
exciting.
commend staff for this. This is awesome. Thank you, because this is what was needed to get out to the community. So the buy-in, and so I really appreciate that, because I think it gives them options that, and they can see it laid out like I needed to. So I appreciate that. So thank you so much.
You know, my experience when I was a principal, I've been a principal of an IB school, a Cambridge school, worked at every single arts high school as well. So I understand their angst. I do understand their angst, which is why for us, we're not taking any of that feedback personal. We want it because that's part of the story as we continue to dive into this discussion.
And I'm going to tag on with Ms. Giovanelli. I really appreciate this too. Even though I was at the Cape meeting, and I really have to give Mr. Simmons credit. Those kids were all over him. And he had to answer for all of them and the parents as well, you know, because they were concerned about their electives, and they were kind of a little bit stressed. And you can definitely see that, but I know in speaking, I think that you gave them a little sense of calmness, so I really do appreciate that. And I could continue to listen to what you were saying to them, so I'd have that information fresh in my head. So what you were saying and what I'm looking at, that really puts it all together now, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I
I just want to say, in case you haven't figured it out from listening to me, the way I operate is via brainstorming and playing devil's advocate. So, yeah, you've put in a great deal of work on it, but, you know, sometimes maybe with all the work you've done, there might just be some little quirk, like, is football a course that kids take?
Football is not a course.
Oh, it's
students
not?
take. No.
Well, they do take it in Texas. I couldn't remember, so.
Basketball is, but not football.
Basketball's a course, like on the team?
There is a
'Cause What
basketball
I was going to
class.
say is, if any of these, the athletics are offered as courses, like what you said about the band, let them be in the band after school, but not be in the course. I imagine the band directors, but certainly the coaches will have a lot to say about that. But, yeah, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
Dr. Atkins, any final words from you, sir?
No, I think what they said really hits it home the way I feel. It's been a team effort, and they have worked really, really hard on this, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And continuing on, nothing for human resources, information system, operations. Next is public comments. Are there any public comments?
I have no blue card, so if you can probably just open and close, you'll be okay.
We will close the public comments. Perfect.
We do.
Board member comments.
It's late in the day, I'm gonna,
Ms. Giminelli? No?
I mean,
Ms.
thank
I've
you.
got a ton that I'm going to save for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Saving for tomorrow.
Ms. Morgan?
I'm not going to say, because they're very fast. First of all, I want to thank the News Press and Pam McCabe for doing a fantastic article about teacher compensation and relative to just cost of living, et cetera. My second comment is the Lee County Human Services gap analysis comment period closes on the 20th. Is anybody in the school district looking at that gap analysis and responding to the comments, or responding with comments?
I'm not sure, honestly, and I'll find out.
I think it's important because I know that there's stuff in there that we need to be talking about with respect to housing, mental health, and transportation, things like that. So, and then my third question was to ask the board chair, but I'll just say to the board, we signed a contract with RSM on September 24th last year. They started construction in November. They've been working on ethics and hotline. They were supposed to start purchasing and procurement in January. Have they started? I would like to see not only a dashboard, but I would like to see an end date. I mean, I just feel like, you know, we're spending money and we have seen not a single product in 6.5 months. And frankly, Dr. Atkins, that's not on you. That's on us, because these people are supposed to be our employees. And so I was actually going to ask the board chair to take this on and really wrestle with it, because I just feel like we're not doing our job. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure she gets that information. I have no comments. Just a quick.
I'll be very quick and brief. Just two things. One, there are two matters of litigation, and pursuant to the Florida statute, I was going to announce a request for closed-door attorney-client session. They're being handled by outside counsel. One of them is a case by the name of Levitt versus Iovine et al. It's an 11th Circuit appellate case, Federal 11th Circuit, case number 20-10275. The other one is a recently filed case from Friday of last week, Jane Doe versus the school board, Federal Middle District of Florida, case 20-CV-00152. That is also being handled by outside counsel. Suzanne Boy is handling the appeal. A gentleman by the name of Richard Aiken is handling the Jane Doe case. So they indicated that they would like to speak to the board to discuss the pertinent closed door issues, and so pursuant to the statute, I'm making that request. The last thing is just with regard to the Jewel litigation. Is that something as the board would like me to bring a proposed, is that something the board is interested in? If so, if it is, I can bring back a proposed retainer agreement so that you can have a further discussion as an action item on it, if it is something you guys are interested in. If it's not, I don't want to just put it on your agenda if there's no reason to.
So do we want him to bring that back to us?
I thought we already said.
Yeah, we did.
Didn't we?
I thought so.
I thought we
Yeah.
had
I
as
didn't
well.
think we had reached consensus.
I thought we did, but there was some.
Well, it looks like
Yeah.
right here we're saying, please.
Okay, so we'll get it on the next agenda item then. And that's it for me.
So I sent you an email this weekend and it was returned to me. And I think Ms. Giovanelli mentioned something funny about your email as well. So
Yeah.
just so you're aware on your end, something's
Okay.
going on that your emails are being returned to us.
And I even forwarded the error, so I don't know, maybe you're not getting them. I don't
Okay,
know.
I will check with the IT department. That's strange, 'cause I haven't heard, I mean, because if it's external emails are getting bounced back, yeah, obviously that's an issue. So I'll make sure our IT department is aware of that and we'll get that rectified.
Thank you. Dr. Atkins?
Just appreciate the flexibility earlier today. I think the press conference was very, very timely. I appreciate the sheriff's leadership in calling that together. We were able to use that forum to, I think, get some really good information out and hopefully drive some people to like our website. And then as was stated earlier, we are in the process of getting additional information out to our schools, our employees, and our parents regarding COVID-19. And those are all my comments.
Is there anything for good of the order? Well then, seeing none, I say that we can go.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
Adjourned.